In the quiet American town, a lonely mechanic spends his days fixing old engines and dreaming of connection. One afternoon, a little girl walks into his workshop, her bicycle broken, her smile full of hope. He fixes it with care, not knowing her mother is a millionaire who's about to have her heart changed forever. Now, let's get started. The sun dipped low over the quiet American suburb, washing the narrow street in soft amber light. Jake Turner, 34, stood outside his small auto repair shop, wiping his hands on a worn rag. The sign above the door had lost some of its paint, and the buzz of a distant highway filled the evening air. Jake's life had grown silent over the years. No family, few friends, just the hum of engines and the company of his own thoughts. Fixing things was what he did best. Machines made sense, people didn't. He was tightening the bolts on an old pickup when a faint metallic rattle drew his attention. A small pink bicycle wobbled down the street, its chain grinding, one handlebar bent. Behind it, a sleek black car rolled slowly. The contrast was almost poetic, the innocent chaos of childhood beside the polished pride of wealth. The bike toppled, and the little girl fell on the pavement. Jake dropped his wrench and hurried over. "You okay there, kiddo?" he asked, his rough voice softening. The girl looked up, her bright eyes watering, but she nodded bravely. From the car stepped a woman, tall, elegant, early 30s. Her white business dress stood out against the dusty street, and her heels clicked sharply as she walked. "Ella, I told you not to ride ahead," she said, her tone more anxious than angry. Jake glanced at the woman, sensing her frustration mixed with care. "Chain's just come off," he said, crouching beside the bike. "I can fix it if you'd like." The woman hesitated, clearly out of her element in front of an oil-stained garage. "And that won't be necessary," she replied coolly, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve. But the little girl tugged at her mother's hand. "Please, Mommy, he can help." Jake smiled faintly. "Won't take long," he promised. The woman sighed and nodded reluctantly. Jake worked in silence, his fingers moving with easy precision. The chain slipped back in place, and he adjusted the bent handlebar. Within minutes, the bike was as good as new. "There you go," he said, stepping back. "Try it now." Ella climbed on and pedaled. The bike rolled forward smoothly, her laughter ringing through the air like a melody Jake hadn't heard in years. "See, Mommy? It works," she shouted. The woman blinked in surprise. "Well, that's impressive," she said softly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a bill. "How much do I owe you?" Jake shook his head, smiling. "Nothing. It was just a little fix." She frowned, confused. "Surely you deserve something for your time." Jake wiped his hands again, meeting her eyes. "Some things are worth more than money, ma'am." "A smile's good enough." Ella giggled and hugged him suddenly, her small arms smudging his shirt with dust. For a moment, Victoria Hale, because that's who she was, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the state, felt a crack in the wall she'd built around her life. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're very kind." Jake nodded and turned back toward his shop. The luxury car door closed behind her, and soon the street fell silent again. But something about that brief encounter stayed with both of them. The kindness of a stranger, the warmth of a child's gratitude, the reminder that goodness often hides in simple places. That evening, Jake sat at his workbench, staring at an old photograph of his parents. They had run this same garage years ago, teaching him that real success wasn't about money. It was about helping people. Somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten that feeling until today. Meanwhile, across town in her glass-walled mansion, Victoria poured herself a glass of wine and watched her daughter draw. Ella was sketching a man fixing a bike, smiling wide. "He's my new friend," she said proudly. Victoria's throat tightened. "Your friend, huh?" she murmured. "He seems like a good man." She couldn't stop thinking about him, the way he refused money, the ease with which he helped without judgment. For years, Victoria had surrounded herself with people who expected something in return. But this mechanic, Jake, had expected nothing and left her feeling strangely humbled. The next morning, she woke with a thought she couldn't shake. Maybe the world needed more people like him. And maybe, Just maybe she needed to see him again. The morning air was crisp as Jake rolled up the garage door of his small workshop. The sunlight stretched across the floor, glinting off wrenches and metal parts neatly lined up on a shelf. He was halfway through tuning an old truck when he heard the deep purr of an expensive engine outside. Looking up, he froze. A black luxury sedan had stopped at the curb, and stepping out was the same woman from yesterday, Victoria Hale, now dressed casually in jeans and a cream sweater. Her daughter Ella hopped out after her, holding a pink box tied with a ribbon. Jake wiped his hands nervously. "Morning, ma'am," he said, smiling slightly. "Everything okay with the bike?" Ella grinned. "It's perfect. Mommy said I can ride again today." Jake chuckled, relief softening his face. Victoria approached, offering the box. "Ella insisted we bring you something. She baked cookies. Well, supervised while I tried to bake." Jake took it carefully, amused. "That's very kind of you both." Ella beamed, proud of herself. "You helped me, so I wanted to help you too." Victoria watched him as he knelt to thank Ella. There was something genuine about his gratitude, something rare in her world. "You work here alone?" she asked quietly. Jake nodded, setting the box aside. "Yeah, my brother used to help, but he moved away a few years back. It's just me now." Victoria's expression softened. "It must get lonely sometimes." Jake smiled faintly. "Machines don't talk back, but they don't lie either. Guess that counts for something." She laughed softly for the first time in a long while. "You have an interesting way of looking at things." They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of birds filling the pause. Jake looked at her car and then back at her. "That's a fine machine," he said, nodding toward it. "Needs regular servicing, though. City air can be tough on engines." She smiled. "I might bring it by then. I have a feeling you'd treat it better than the dealership does." Jake shrugged modestly. "I treat all engines the same, rich or poor." Something about that line made her heart twist a little. It wasn't about cars, it was about people. Ella ran inside the garage, fascinated by the tools. "Wow, you fix all these things?" she asked. Jake grinned. "Every single one. Want to see how an engine breathes?" He knelt beside her, showing her how a piston moved. Ella's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "That's amazing," she gasped. Victoria watched them, surprised by how natural he was with her daughter. For years, she had surrounded Ella with tutors and gadgets, but none of them could make her smile the way this mechanic just did. When it was time to leave, Victoria hesitated. "Mr. Turner," she began, "would you join us for lunch sometime? To thank you properly." Jake shook his head politely. "That's not necessary, ma'am. Your cookies were thanks enough." She studied him, seeing something in his calm humility that both intrigued and disarmed her. "Then maybe we'll just stop by again," she said softly. "You'd be welcome any time," Jake replied, meaning it. Days turned into weeks, and Victoria did return, sometimes with her car, sometimes just for conversation. Jake would make coffee, and they'd talk about everything from engines to childhood dreams. Ella often rode her bike around the shop while her mother watched, her laughter blending with the hum of tools. Slowly, an unexpected friendship formed between two people who couldn't have come from more different worlds. One afternoon, Victoria arrived with a proposal. "Jake," she said, "Hale Industries is expanding. We're launching an automotive tech division, and I'd like you to be part of it." Jake blinked in surprise. "Me? I'm just a small-town mechanic," she smiled. "Exactly. You see things that others overlook. You fix what others replace. That's the kind of heart I want in my team." He hesitated, glancing around his modest shop. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I belong in boardrooms and suits." Victoria looked around his workshop, then back at him. "Then let me help you here instead. I can invest, new tools, better equipment, maybe expand the place. You'd still run it your way." Jake frowned. "Why? You barely know me." She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Because yesterday you fixed more than a bike. You reminded me what honesty looks like." Ella ran over, tugging at Jake's sleeve. "Mommy says you're her friend now." Jake laughed. "Is that so?" Victoria blushed but didn't deny it. The three of them stood there for a moment, sunlight streaming through the open door. The garage, once quiet and lonely, now buzzed with life and laughter. Jake looked at the small pink bicycle leaning against the wall and smiled. It had started everything, a simple act of kindness that had rippled far beyond what he'd imagined. Later that evening, when Victoria and Ella drove away, Jake stood outside his workshop watching them disappear down the road. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He turned back toward his tools, a faint smile on his face. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring something new, a reason to keep fixing things, not just machines but hearts too.